All right. Well, welcome to everybody. I hope you guys are truly and abundantly being blessed, and I hope some of the goodness and the truth that I've shared with you will help you to walk on your journey and maybe live a little better life and maybe gain understanding in some areas. I think all of us need a consistent gaining of understanding. There's so much to learn and so much change, and so we just really truly are blessed that we get this opportunity. And so we'll go together, if you would, with me, and it's called Coming to Your Heart Center. The heart is a really amazing thing. And then we just bow to each other and we say namaste. Very simple, doesn't take a lot to welcome and be kind. You know, it's amazing. Of all of the things, kindness costs us nothing, but it has some of the greatest rewards. And a lot of people would do well in their creating of a reality to not forget that. So, well, they walked with Jesus again tonight. This is the second Dolores canon book that we've entered into. Last week we started the first of this. Some profound things. If you pondered on them during the week, then you truly have been blessed. And I think there's a piece that could be asked. Well, unfortunately for people who want to stay inside of the matrix, and that is exactly what many of these things are, and then you really don't want someone to tell you that your belief system is not correct. And if you're looking for truth, you may not want that, but when you come to that as a place, then you'll realize that it is and accept it and go on with the change. And so that's really the main difference. But they walked with Jesus, and we left off in page 22 for those of you who were checking it out on your phones or whatever. And so if you remember right, Dolores is asking along the line of questions. This young girl that she is regressing has come to a place. She's a teacher on the Temple Mount, on the temple itself, and teaches children. She's a metaphysic. She's not a Jew. Even if she's Jewish, she's not a practicing Jew, but she's drawn to the house of God. And I know that it's hard for us to believe sometimes, but there have been many, many, many things that we have a picture of that the people that lived then did not have or share our picture. Our picture came from someone else's telling us what went on. And so that's part of the reason why these things can be really huge. Secondly, for those of you who haven't, past life regression is pretty amazing, and it really is amazing because there's just way too much things that happen, and it's not usually what you want or think it's going to be. And so anyways, we left off on page 22, and so Dolores writes here, she had asked a series of questions. The girl was on the Temple Mount. She could hear a voice and she could see somebody teaching, but she really hadn't gotten close and hadn't heard, and she had these children to take care of. And so we're going to pick up in that dialogue. If you remember right, Dolores said that she wanted to go further there, but the girl had a time schedule this day, and so they kind of put everything on hold so that she could get the essence of this interaction. And so Dolores says, I was trying to bring this session to a close before we begin this day's work. Mary had said she wanted to come out of a trance at a certain time because she had an appointment. If Abigail wasn't going to go over and hear this man, we would probably not be able to learn much more at this time. I did not know if the man was Jesus, but the indications were leading in that direction, and I wanted to pursue this and to find out. I didn't want to get involved now because I wanted to devote more time to this event, and both the time and the tape were running out. And so I plan to continue in the next session. And Mary says, I have a feeling that we will know each other. There is a common understanding that will draw us to each other. I can be patient. And Dolores says, yes, this is true. People who think alike usually find each other. But I was curious about the Jewish beliefs that someday a Messiah will come. Is it true that they are looking for a Messiah, and do you know? And she says, it's as if I will not carry that in my mind. So think about some of the metaphysical things that I've shared with you all about what we're supposed to do. And so if you remember and you ponder and you think and you continue to study and grow and learn on these things, then you can immediately pick up on who this person is and what their thoughts and belief system are. And so she says, yes, this is true, that people who think alike, of course, we know the cliche, birds of a feather flock together. That's not just a cliche, friend. That is a metaphysical reality. And so she says, it's as if I will not carry that in my mind. It's as if what I have in my mind is light. It's pure, and it is as if I will not accept anger, fear, condemnation. I will not carry it in my mind. And I thought, what a wonderful learning lesson for all of us. She would not even entertain those thoughts, and that's a heck of a step, and certainly it's one that's a blessing to all of us. And so she says, it's as if I will not accept anger, fear, condemnation. I will not carry it in my mind. Wow. So she had deliberately shut out, or perhaps had not been exposed to any of the traditional Jewish theology. And you would think in the year around the year 1 BC, you would think that a person living in Jerusalem, a spiritual teacher on the steps of the temple every day, you would think that she would just totally be steeped in Jewish belief. And so that also tells us that maybe just as it is with Christianity, there were lots of other people with lots of other belief systems that coexisted in the city of Jerusalem and maybe all of greater Israel. And so Dolores says she had deliberately shut out, or perhaps had not been exposed to any of the traditional Jewish theology. She apparently had been very sheltered, and in the beginning of the sessions, she said she was as virgin material when her teachers began their classes. Maybe this was intentional, so she would not be influenced by traditional schools of thought. And, the truth is that Christians do the same thing. Christians don't want their children to find out anything outside of Christianity. That's why they use the fear tactic that astrology is bad and tarot cards are evil, and there's it's all of those, that whole plethora of spiritual things that most Christians know nothing about if they're good Christians, and they certainly don't want their children to learn. So that principle in and of itself is used by every sect of humanity, whatever that may be. And so the purpose for doing that is the same purpose we do it, so that our children are influenced negatively. And so Dolores then says, then you are not accepting of any of the men's teachings, the rabbis, the priests, the same ones that were attacking Yeshua. And Mary says, I seem to have some kind of a shield around me, that I don't accept it in my mind. And Dolores says, I can see why you would block it out, because the men are so negative, even though they're supposed to be the priests of God. And Mary says, pompous, if you'll forgive me, this man has light around him, and that's why I know that I will know him someday. And Dolores asks, can you see him? And Mary says, yes, I can see there is a light around him. So this is not as strange a phenomena as we might believe. What's unfortunate is that most people, the programming that they get in the first 2 to 7 years of their life actually blinds them to the spiritual truth. That's why you have so many young kids who have imaginary friends that they see. Those are spirits, and they're around us. They're real. They're definitely not just talking to the air. They're not playing ball with someone and they're crazy. And a lot of these things, to be quite honest with you, really, a lot of these true metaphysical things really do shine a little bit of a bad light on psychology and psychiatry, because there's many of those things that they call people because of these kind of experiences, and quite honestly, it's not true at all. And so she says, I can see why you would block it out because the men are so negative. And then, of course, Mary goes into it and says, if you'll forgive me, this man has light all around him. So is she speaking metaphorically, figuratively? And that's why I know that I will know him someday. And so Dolores asks, can you see him? And she says, yes, I can see that there is light around him. That's his aura. All of us have an aura. Some people's auras are not very light, and some people's carry a great light. Some people turn on and their aura gets exposed more than maybe in other times or than other people's. And so Dolores says, did you go around the building? And Mary says, no, I can see through the column. He's at a different location, but I can see, yes, he is of the light. And so think about it in your life, because your intuition, which comes from your higher self, when your intuition speaks to you, friend, it's not typically some spirit from somewhere else. And I know many of you may not have any knowledge or very little knowledge about pieces of why and what all this is really about, but intuition is the voice of your higher self. And it's quite strange that many of the things that are being taught, once again, and I hate to say this because it seems like I'm at odds with them, and I'm not. I'm at odds with things that I find out in my journey are not correct that are being taught. And of course, that doesn't mean that everybody else is teaching what's right. What it means is that little by little, Source will help us to see things, and it doesn't mean that everything they teach is bad. Not everything that Christianity teaches is bad. I'm not against the things that are good. I'm against the things that are lies and deceptions, and we should be against those things. And so she says, no, I see them through the columns. And if you remember the columns of the temple, they were about 5 foot in diameter, solid marble. So we're talking about something other than eyes she's seeing spiritually. And Dolores asks, did you go around the building? And Mary says, no, I can see through the columns. He's at a different location, but I can see, yes, he is of the light. Do you normally see lights around people? And Mary says, children sometimes, but not as this light. This light has white light all around him. And so when he says to you, he really is teaching, really. Yeshua was an amazing mystical teacher. And I know some of you may not understand that or even want to believe that, but this guy was so mystical and out there it wasn't funny. And the more that you learn the truth, the more that what he says begins to make sense from that facet. And she says, no, it's not normally that I see lights around people, but children sometimes. And but in his case, his aura, his light that was around him was bright, and it was white all the time. "Oh, that must be very beautiful," Dolores asked, and Mary says, "Well, it sets him off from others," and then she laughs. And Dolores laughs, "Can you see what he looks like, or is he too far away?" And Mary says, "He's at a side angle to me, and he seems to be in white with some kind of brown cinched at the... It's as if there is a piece of cloth that goes over his shoulders, back, front and back, and then it's held next to the body at the waist." And Dolores asks, "Can you see what his features look like?" And Mary says, "No, he's distant. We are of like mind. It's almost as if there is a connection even at this distance." And she lets out a sudden gasp. And Dolores asks, "What is it?" Another intake of breath. "What is it?" And Mary says, "Oh, he felt the connection." And Dolores says, "What?" And Mary says, "He is coming, he is coming, he is coming up the stairs to see the children." And her voice was in complete awe. And I was running out of tape, and I could not put another one in the machine because of the restrictions Mary had placed on the sessions. What bad timing to have something like this happen at this point. Frustrated, I knew I would have to find some way to close the session without upsetting her so we could return to it next time for closer examination in more details. And Mary says the crowd is following him, and he perceives the light around the children. He understands we are of like mind. Well, this is very beautiful, but I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it. I would love to hear it, but we're running out of time. I can't stay with you today. Can you return to it again if we leave this? And Mary says, "Oh, I would like very much to know more about this man." And Dolores says, "Then the next time I come, we will continue with this. It's very beautiful, and I appreciate you sharing it with me. Now let us leave that seed." And she was still making sounds of awe and delight, and I really hated to do this, but we had no alternative. She had obligations to attend to in the real world. And Dolores says, "Carry the beautiful feeling with you. Let's drift away from that scene, and we shall return to it another time. Carry the beauty of it and the warmth and the love with you as you drift away from that scene." And her facial expressions and body movements were displaying protest. She really didn't want to leave the scene, but she had to obey the instructions given by me, the hypnotherapist. She could not remain in trance, no matter how much she wanted to. The scene was evaporating, and she was being pulled forward through time and returning to the room. And so Dolores says, "It's all right. We shall come back to it, I promise." And I oriented her personality to the present time, and then brought Mary back to full consciousness. When she awakened, she was still under the spell of that closing scene, and she began crying. And I apologized for having to take her away from it, and she understood because she was the one who set the time limits for the session, but she was still disappointed. And I quickly put in a fresh tape and recorded part of her conversation after awakening. And Dolores asked, "I just want to record a little of what you said. You said that as you looked in each other's eyes, it was love at first sight." And Mary says, "There was a depth of understanding that was overwhelming. I couldn't believe that I was being asked to leave. I mean, I had just gotten there. It was so strong." And Dolores says, "Sorry," and laughs. And Mary says, "Dolores, it was like things that have happened to me in this lifetime that I haven't been able to understand. I have been taken away from things that mean so much with resolution, but we'll go back." And so Dolores says, "We will, and then we'll be able to finish it, but you weren't close enough, I guess, to really." And so Mary says, "I was almost close enough to reach out and touch his hand." And so Dolores says, could you get a look at his face?" And Mary says, "Yes," in awe. "I was looking in his eyes." And Dolores says, "What did his face look like?" And she says, "Oh, strong and gentle and love." That was all that was on his face, was love. His eyes were There was just love. He was not big, so gentle, so kind. Oh, we've got to go back. And so Dolores asked, what color hair did he have? And Mary pauses, and almost as if when the sun hit it, there was some red in it. And so Dolores said, did you see the color of his eyes? And Mary says, no, they were very deep eyes. The eyes were almost as if there was no end to them. They just went straight on inside. Laugh. It was like that saying, how you got lost in somebody's eyes. That was what it was like. The children were excited. They could see that there was something going on here, and they didn't know who to look at. And so Dolores asked, I have never had to leave a scene at a worse spot. I normally plan it better than that, so this confusion and dissatisfaction can be avoided. And so Dolores says, I did not know much about Mary's private life. As she sat on the edge of the bed, she now confided that she had been married and divorced 3 times. She said that all during her life, things and people she'd loved had been taken away from her. And that was how she felt about this. Right at the point when she saw him, apparently a high point in her drab, unhappy life, I made her leave. She was very impressed by this man and wanted to know more about him. From her descriptions and reactions, there was no doubt in my mind that the man she had seen was Jesus. This was why I was very surprised when she said, with a faraway look in her eyes, I wonder who he was. Startled, I asked, you mean you don't know? And she said she really didn't have any idea, except that he was definitely a remarkable and unusual man. And I replied, I didn't think I would tell her my assumptions, and I would let her find out for herself during the next session. Her remarks would seem to definitely rule out any unconscious desire on her part to create a fantasy trip that would allow her to meet Jesus. She did not even recognize him as that person. She gathered her belongings, and with a heavy sigh she entered her van. She then returned to the everyday business world of delivering her plans. The scene she described clung to me and permeated the air around me with a soft sweetness. Yes, we would return. I had to know more about this remarkable man she had brought forth through time. Chapter 3, The Healing. It was upsetting both to Mary and myself when I had to end the last session abruptly at such a crucial point. When we met the next week, I was determined to return to the same day if it were possible. Hopefully, we could continue with the story of Abigail's encounter with the unusual man whom I recognized as Jesus. Before we began the session, Mary wanted to tell me about her memory of the dance with the children on the temple steps. We sat on the couch, and I turned on the tape recorder, and working with these cases, it is never wise to attempt to rely on your memory or notes, as too many details may be lost that may prove invaluable later. A chance insignificant remark may turn out to be an important link that will tie the story together. The tape recorder is an indispensable tool, even though weeks will often pass before the tapes can be transcribed. And the faraway look in Mary's eyes was evident that she was visually reliving the scene in her mind. She once again saw the children on the steps, laughing and carefree. And Mary says, the way it came into my visual memory was that the children and I would start in a single file line, and we would curve around and turn ourselves into a little tight circle, and then the leader would lead us out of that tight circle into the open again. We'd do a little curve around, come back into a little tight circle, and then we'd undo it again. All this was accompanied with hand motions, and the purpose of this was to symbolically explain to the children that there were times in our lives when we needed to go into ourselves and be quiet and alone. Then a time to go out into the world and be out and open. Then the next balance would be back into yourself to be by yourself and alone, and then again out into the world. It was used as an example or an understanding for them to know. The balance between the contemplative life and an active life. I could see the symbolic meaning. It came through as clear as a crystal to me. So Dolores says, you said you also used some type of sticks and a tambourine. And Mary says, yes, that was for percussion and was a different dance. That one wasn't as clear to me, except that I could see the children on the steps. There must have been a wide step that was a breakdown between two staircases where we did that dance. The steps of the temple weren't like one set of stairs. It was like a set of stairs and then a wide landing and then another set of stairs. So I think we did that kind of dance on the wide landing. So Dolores says, at first it sounded strange that you were dancing on the steps, but they weren't like we think of as stairs. And she says, no, they were very wide. I was teaching the children this way, and the men felt this was safe because they thought I couldn't influence the children. I was in my appropriate place. But there was much spiritual teaching done. I'll tell you another interesting thing that occurred this summer, and that was very uncharacteristic of me. I was at a large garden supply place here in town that I used for my business. I'd gone there to pick up plants to install in a commercial garden that I was doing. And all of a sudden, I saw this little pottery piece that was shaped like a dove sitting down there on the floor. And for some reason, I could not take my attention off of that dove. I finally bought it. The reason it was so uncharacteristic is because it cost $34, and that's a lot of money to put for a pottery dove. But it was as though the dove spoke to me. I mean, it was an instant reaction. And last week during the regression, when that dove came out of her cage, I almost said Paloma, because that was what I named the little pottery piece. That is the Spanish word for dove, but that dove must have been trained because it didn't fly away. And so Mary says, right, she and I had a spiritual connection. We communicated. And Dolores says, I thought when you let it out it would fly away, but apparently it stayed right there. And Mary says, she flew, she circled around, she showed all the freedom of flight, she knew to exhibit her freedom in the sky, and she knew to come back so that she could teach others how to go and fly. Dolores says, that was the symbolism. And Mary says, she really understood that she was a spiritual aid in my teaching. We were very close. And that incident with the pottery dove occurred months before we started to work. Maybe your subconscious was trying to set you up for this, as if saying, this is time, or something. Seeing the little statue was trying to trigger a memory. And Mary says, well, it must have, because when I got home that night after the regression and I walked past Paloma, I thought, now I understand why you are so dear to me. And Dolores says it was an important connection to a memory. You know, one thing that in my journey, and maybe it's not your journey, but in my journey that I have found is there are things that, and sometimes they can be really strange things, that will grab you. And quite amazing when they do, because you recognize that there's a significance to them. And so she has one of those, as we all probably have had, many times. And so as we begin the regression, my task was to return Mary to the same lifetime and hopefully locate the same scene again. I used her keyword and counted her back to the lifetime of Abigail. And Dolores says, I will count to 3 and we will go back through time and space. And on the count of 3, we will be at the time when Abigail lived in Jerusalem. 1, 2, 3. We have gone back through time and space to the time that Abigail was in Jerusalem. What are you doing, and what do you see? And when I finished counting, Mary displayed facial reactions. And Dolores asked, what is it? And Mary, smiling, the children. Can you see the children? I'm so close to the children. They are so dear to me. And Dolores asked, what are the children doing? And Mary laughed, saying, being children, bouncing around, climbing up and down the stairs. They're just being joyful, talking to the turtle dove. So Dolores says, oh, they like that turtle dove, don't they? Mary says, yes, she's such a special spirit. And Dolores asks, where are you? On the steps of the temple, very loving tone of voice. Children are so special. One little girl likes the tambourine. We have ribbons coming off the side of it, and she loves to dance around and shake the tambourine and let those ribbons stream. We're not trying to do a structured learning thing right now. We're just spending time together. And so Dolores asked, didn't you say that the priest will let you work with the children? Mary says, yes, yes. Unbeknownst to the priest, these children are vessels. They are repositories for the knowledge and training that I have been given. And whether the children fully understand what we are doing during our time together, it still becomes a part of them. And when their life gets to a point where that information can be helpful to them, they will be able to pull it out. They will have that pattern established. And so I wanted to just say to all of us, you know, it really has been for me quite amazing to learn how the human child develops and grows, and how much good or how much damage can be done to a child's life so young. And so Dolores says to her, they may not remember where it comes from, but it will be there. And Mary says, right, we have such influence over the lives of the children as they develop. It's almost as a conditioning to them at this age. We influence how they respond to their world as they get older. If you prepare them in the ways of understanding and wisdom, they will be able to pull that out of their memory in their later lives. And the priests think you can do no harm this way. Mary says, I'm safe. I'm doing something that is safe and acceptable work for a woman. Allowing the children to be around the temple and letting them have a woman who is not an intimidating figure to them. Yes, my work is. Oh, it's just a crumb that they have thrown to me, not knowing what an opportunity they have given me. It's probably something they don't want to be bothered with. And Mary says, yes, and they do understand that women have a certain way with children that they themselves do not have. They are so filled with their own importance and position that they can't help but intimidate children. It's almost as if they strike fear in the hearts of children, distastefully. Because of their elaborate costumes, their headpieces and robes, and all the paraphernalia that goes along with that function, that role. So here, the children and I play in our everyday clothes. We can sit in the sun and we can move to the shade if it gets too warm. And we have common, easily loved tools to work with because our life is a common life. Very few people get into positions of unusual authority or have elaborate support systems around them. We all live in common everyday ways. And if we can take the common tools of our lives and understand that they can represent a much larger understanding, that we have accomplished something in the lives of these regular people. And so Dolores asks, we have more influence than we realize we do. And Mary says, yes, I think that is true. I think we do not fully appreciate how much we can influence the children around us. I think the priests are making a mistake. You could be a big help to the adults too, but they don't realize that. And Mary softly says, the knowledge, I don't know where the knowledge is going to go. And Dolores says, well, you're doing your part by helping these children. And Mary says, yes, this simple preparatory, but the full knowledge that I have is, I don't know, maybe somebody will be brought to me that I can pass it on to. My head is so full, my head, I do what I can do. And Dolores says, there is always me. I'm eager to learn and I appreciate what you are doing. And Mary says, thank you. And Dolores says, but if the priests don't want you there, why are you there? I thought maybe they could chase you out or make you leave. Can't they do that? And Mary says, my understanding is that I am attached. That part was arranged by the people that I trained with. This was the goal or the outcome of that teaching and preparation. When it was completed, I was to go to the temple. This was supposed to be an excellent place for me to teach and share the knowledge. They didn't know this would happen. It wasn't supposed to be this way, but nothing can be done about it now. The priests understand that I have mystical knowledge, and they think that it is not to be shared with the common people. Nor am I to be in a position of influence as a teacher. It is as if they have effectively bottled up what I have been given. They allow me only a very minor outlet, and that is with the children. But the children are such a small part of what I have been prepared to do. I'm not being allowed to do what I was prepared to do. And so oftentimes we find ourselves in that situation. And so she says, why my mind? That's why my mind, my head is so tight and so full. I think the priests are probably afraid of you. They want it all their own way. Mary says, yes, I think that even though these men have set themselves up to be spiritual leaders, they go by the letter of the law of the books. They have no use for knowledge or for that which comes into the heart as a gift of God, but only what can be read from the written pages. And the knowledge that has been shared with me and that I must share with others is an esoteric nature. They have no use for it. They are somewhat frightened, but more than that, they just don't understand it as a complement to the law. She's referring to the Torah, or book of Jewish rules of conduct. They say it is as frivolous, almost formless aspect of spirituality. I believe they think it is properly contained in a woman's mind, but it is of feeling and intuition and spirit knowing, rather than the mind reasoning, oh, they're rules. And so Dolores asks, what kind of rules? Mary responds, they have a rule for everything. Look it up in the book instead of looking into the heart. They lose the spirit of the law and they look at the letter of the law. And Dolores says, I don't think that they would understand even if you tried to explain it to them. They aren't the proper type of people. Mary says, I agree. And Dolores says, but I hope that if we meet like this, you can share some of your esoteric knowledge with me. I'd be grateful to learn these things. It may help you to release it in that way. And so Mary says, at this time, that seems not acceptable. Dolores says, I didn't mean right at this moment. I meant sometime. And Mary says, you would have to go through as an initiation or an introduction for me to understand what it is that you're asking to receive. Then you would decide whether you have indeed wanted the responsibility of this knowledge. As I say, the carrying of the knowledge without release is a physical pain in my head. It is from here to there a physical pain. She made motions across the width of her forehead. And Dolores asked, across your forehead? Well, I don't want you to be uncomfortable. Mary says, I'm used to it. It is there. And so Dolores says, I have suggestions to alleviate any physical sensations. While I speak to you, it won't bother you. I don't want you to be uncomfortable in any way. And Mary says, thank you. Dolores says, but maybe as we work together and I visit with you, you might be able to give me the initiation and we could find out. And so Mary says, it will be up to you. It is a responsibility that is not taken lightly. And so Dolores says, all right, but today I'm interested in what you're doing. You're playing with the children. Are there any other people around? And Mary says, it seems there are people that are rather wandering around. They don't seem to have a focused purpose or specific aim to their walk, more like visiting, walking around, seeing what it is like. Maybe they are from outside our area and they live away from here. So this would be a special opportunity for them to come into this space and acquaint themselves with this temple. They look up and say, oh, look, and pointing. And so Dolores asks, is the temple beautiful? And Mary says, yes, it is very big and tall, high spaces. It is, and I hesitate to use the word intimidating, but the size is remarkable. And Dolores says this is probably what they are amazed about. Well, on this day, is anything else happening right there around the temple? And I was trying to return to the encounter with the man, I assumed to be Jesus, and continue that story. I didn't know if this was the same day or not. And so Mary softly says, that man. And Dolores says, what man? And Mary says, that man of light. Apparently she was seeing him once again. We had returned to the same scene without asking to. However, this was our intention, and Mary's subconscious was aware of this. And so the last time I spoke to you, you could see him through the columns, and he was speaking to some other people with the voice of authority. Is that what you see? And her facial expressions were those of a pleasant experience. Mary says, yes, that light. Dolores says, but what does the light look like? And Mary says, it is white, completely around him. It emanates from every part of his body, from his feet, all around his body and to his head, amazed. It's as if he walks in a capsule of light. Oh, it sounds beautiful. It's most remarkable. I have never seen anything like that. He is of the light. And Dolores says, what do you think is causing the light? And Mary says, his spirit. It is an outer manifestation of his inner light. Oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. It simply cannot be obtained in a physical body, and so it emanates out. It is really clear just for me to see. And Dolores says, are you surprised that you can see something like that? And Mary says, oh, no, that's not uncommon. Just the nature of the light itself is most unusual. It is such a white light. And Dolores says, you mean it's not unusual for you to see the lights around people? Mary says, no, I am of that knowledge. And Dolores says, were the other lights you've seen different? Mary says, yes, this is very different. The children you see have their soft glows about them, their pinks and their yellows and their greens, very soft, childlike, glowing jewels. This man is a diamond. This man is a clear, white, powerful light. Very, very powerful. And so Dolores says, what is he doing? Mary says, he is talking to the people. He's using his arms as he talks. He does speak with much authority, and he's not necessarily pleased with the behavior of some people. And Dolores asks, can you hear him saying these things? Mary says, no. I can't tell by the tone of his voice. His words are not clear to me. He's facing another direction, and the projection is away from my hearing. But the tone of voice tells much. Dolores says, as though he's not pleased about something, and Mary says, well, it's not a reprimand, it's more of an explanation, a very firm explanation. If they can see the truth, then they will be able to align themselves more with his light. And I would say to you that there's a lot of really, really good teachings that you could extract out of this about how you learn to function in the spirit realm. So far, everything that she's said, I believe, is correct. And so Dolores asks, "Can you hear him saying these words?" And Mary says, "No, I can tell by the tone of his voice. His words are clear to me. He's facing another direction, and the projection is away from my hearing, but the tone of his voice tells much." Well, it's not a reprimand, it's more of an explanation, a very firm explanation. If they can see the truth, then they will be able to align themselves more with his light. And another piece that I just really felt convicted about there, whether we know it or not, there is really a lot more wisdom in those words, because here's a principle that we would benefit from if we would constantly contemplate this. If we cannot understand the things that Source and Spirit are bringing to us, if we are not aligned with Him, it seems like in the sect that is here today, that is alive today, there's not really much understanding amongst those people about what it means to be aligned with Source. And how do I know that? Because they use His words and they totally obliterate them to express their belief system. And so Dolores says, "This is difficult for people to do. Those people that are standing around him seem to be of a very dark and a dense energy. It's almost as if an intake of breath, a revelation. It's almost as if he's talking to lumps of coal." And then she laughs. "They seem really dark and dense, and he has such a light. He seems to be trying to allow them to come out of their denseness and receive some of his light. And he's using firm language to get their attention and help them understand the importance of what he is saying. It is not unkind. It is, as they say, gentle but firm." And so Dolores says sometimes that's what we have to have. And Mary says, "Yes, this man is very loving. It's as if he loves all of those lumps of coal, and he wants so much another intake of breath, another revelation. Oh, he wants to turn them into diamonds. That's why the analogy is there. Those lumps of coal can become diamonds like himself." She was very pleased by her discovery. And Dolores asked, "It would take a great deal of work, though, wouldn't it?" And Mary says, "Oh, they are so dense. They are so dark. He has quite an undertaking." Here's the thing that just hit me. It's an old cliche. Maybe many of you have heard this for years. It was more common in the past eras, that when there was somebody who wasn't very bright, they would say of them, "Oh, that person's very dense." And the connotation is that they're not very smart. But it appears to me that the proper understanding of that concept of someone being dense isn't a mental issue, it's a spiritual issue. And so that's something that I've never had put together like that. I've certainly been called dense, I'm sure, and I've certainly called some people dense. And now I see that that's not the way that I was taught that word to mean is not what it was really intended to be. It actually is speaking of your spirit. If somebody says you're dense, you know, well, your behavior might not be very bright, but they're really not talking about your intelligence. They're actually talking about your spiritual density. And of course, if you're spiritual at all, you sense that around people really quick. And so that's a beautiful little revelation piece that we were given today. And so Mary answers Dolores' question, and she says, "Oh, they are so dense, they are so dark, he has quite an undertaking." And that is the world we live in, folks. And so Dolores asks, "Would you want to go and listen to him?" And Mary says, "I feel as if I can wait. As long as the children are in my care, I will keep their little spirits joyful, safe, and secure, so that they always feel almost as if they are in a protective cocoon when they are with me. I think it enhances the teachings. I think they are more receptive to having the teachings settle into a deep, dark part of their mind when we maintain that cocoon around us, as a unit, as a body, as the teacher and students are one." And so I would say to you, think about in the past when people were a lot more isolated. I certainly don't agree, and I don't think that all of this social media nonsense is beneficial for children. In fact, it seems like to me that you opened the door for every unclean spirit that wants to pollute their mind. And you open the door for yourself to pollute your mind. Really, if you understand source and light, then you know that we are never supposed to quit learning. So you are being programmed every day of your life. And whether you let a computer program you or whether you let someone else program you is really going to be totally up to you. But whether you recognize it or not, you are being programmed. Every video game, and I play them a little bit, but every video game out there is to manipulate your mind to a thought process. It doesn't matter which one it is. It doesn't matter whether it's fishing, hunting, or war games, or other things, which I don't want to talk about. And so she says, "I feel as if I can wait. As long as the children are in my care, I will keep their little spirits joyful, safe, secure, so that they always feel almost as if they are in a protective cocoon when they are with me. I think it enhances the teaching. I think they are more receptive to having the teaching settle into a deep part of their mind when we maintain that cocoon around us as a unit, as a body, as the teacher and students are one." And so Dolores asks, "The last time you spoke of this, I thought you were afraid to take them there because you didn't know who this man was and what he was saying, that maybe it might frighten the children." And Mary says, "There was that man who said, 'Come and listen. I will stay with the children.' Our relationship is very important, and I don't want there to be an intrusion upon that. It's almost as if we stay in a sphere of colored light as we are together. Yes, I will stay here, and we will maintain, but I can see that this gentleman would not be an intrusion. Rather, his light would expand to encompass our light." And so Dolores said, "I thought maybe there was fear there, that you thought the children would be endangered in some way." And Mary says, "No, it's more a matter of maintaining our own sphere. You know, when you get around those black lumps of coal, it can't help but affect your own aura, your own glow and light." Dolores says, "Yes, I understand that." Mary says, "And the children are with me in a trust bond. I have no desire to take them around that other energy. They will have plenty of that in their lives. We have a trust relationship, and I will maintain that." And so Dolores says, "That is good. It was not him that you were worried about being around. And Mary says, I don't think I have to fear that man. And Dolores says, I'm going to move ahead a little bit. Last time you said he sensed your presence and turned around. And Mary says, yes, it was almost as if there was a connection between us, a bond that can travel through this physical space. It's almost as if we were attracted to each other, that the energy within him and the energy within me are similar energies, and we are pulled to that light energy. And Dolores says, tell me what is happening. And Mary says, he senses my presence because he is sensitive to energy. And Dolores says, it must be a different type of energy from the ones he's speaking to. And Mary says, yes, yes. And Dolores, with a long pause, what is he doing now? And Mary says, he is still talking to the other people. Her facial expressions indicated that she was experiencing something. What is it? Mary softly says, yes, he will come. And Dolores says, what do you mean? And Mary, with sounds of delight, says, he will come in response to our light. And Dolores says, do you think he can see the lights around you? And Mary said positively, oh yes, he can see. I don't think there's anything he can't see. And Dolores says he must be a very remarkable person. And Mary says he is. He came to us, as I said, his light has expanded to take in our light, and we are now part of his light. And Dolores asks, what is he doing? And Mary in awe, the children are glowing, and the children are glowing. She was making sounds of awe and delight. Alive, yes, the energy is, oh, my whole body is tingling. Oh, the children, oh, the children. They are being children. They are tugging at his sleeve and the edge of his gown and asking him to kneel down, which he is doing. So I'll take you back to the piece of the thing. If you remember, the proper Hebrew interpretation from Jeff Benner says this. So listen at this picture. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And it says that Yod He Vav He, if you replace that, if you put God there or Father there, says he will kneel before you. So we see Yeshua fulfilling that in essence. I assure you that Mary and her name before had never probably read this in that context, and yet it's exactly what he's doing. He put his protective fence. What was his protective fence? His protective fence was his light. So he's actually living out the Aaronic blessing in front of these children. Let's see if the rest of it's there, because I bet it is. And he understands the children, yes, and the children respond to him as if the man has grown up, result of what they have been being fed a spoonful at a time. It's as if, oh, this is what we can become. This is why we're learning what we're learning. Look, this is what it's like when it's all grown up. And Dolores says, they can sense that? And Mary says, yes. Oh, we have been taken into his light. It's a most wonderful and unusual. Her voice was so filled with delight that she had difficulty completing sentences. And Dolores, feelings? And Mary says, yes, the whole thing is as if we are out of time and space. We are all in this sphere of white light. Deep sigh. Well, he wants to know what the children have learned. And Dolores said, oh, he's talking to them. And Mary says, what is your favorite game and what is your favorite song? And can you show me? But the children are too excited to come together and delightfully laugh. Did the crowd follow him? And Mary says, there are people, yes, down there. It's as if the children have transformed the crowd also. Now, I don't sense the crowd so much as black, dense lumps, but more as a group of colors, many colors and textures and shapes. They are not distinct, but there is a crowd there. We are not on the same plane that they are on. And Dolores says, do you mean something happened when he came over to you? And Mary says, yes, we are suspended in this. We are in our own world. It is very pleasant. And Dolores says, is he talking to you also or just to the children? And Mary says, it's as if he understands who I am and that it does not need to be spoken to. It's as if he is being an example for the children, that his presence here and the time that he has spent with them in this moment will stay with them all of their lives. That is his main purpose for coming over. For the children to have this experience of energy and bonding and being lifted up in this white light. Wow. And suspended out of time and space, the children will remember this always, even into other lifetimes. They have had this contact. And Dolores said, did he talk to them, or do you think just being around them was enough? And Mary says he knelt down, he is on their level. He has his arms around them. The children are excited and communicative. He seems to be able to understand all of them at the same time. He looks up at me in an intake of breath. Oh, he understands so much. Oh, she was almost overcome by emotion. And Dolores asked, what is it? And Mary, almost crying, her voice was quivering. He understands the pain in my head. He understands the knowledge that I'm not being allowed to share. Oh, he loves me for what I am able to do. It's as if this is enough. To work with the children, to share what I can with their young developing minds will be enough. It will be enough. Oh, that man, I believe that he took away the pain. And Dolores says, did he touch you? Mary says, no, but it's gone. And I think we'll stop right there. What an amazing concept. Wow. I know in Christianity, and it even as real today as it ever has been in my life. Those concepts right there are just so amazing. How horrible would it be if all of that is lost simply because of people teaching? What a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful world it is when we live in His presence. So I hope you guys have been blessed with this. And I hope that some of you have been experiencing or will begin to experience these wonderful, significant energy, light, unveilings, revelations. Quite amazing to say for sure. Quite amazing. When Source touches you and you're moved in your deepest part and moved in love, it is certainly amazing. So, peace to each and every one of you. We'll pick up there next week, Source willing, and we'll continue on. I don't believe the Father's done. I think He's got a lot more to do. And so, shalom and blessings to each and every one of you. May you be richly blessed. Namaste. Shalom.